Welcome. This week we did Under the Net by Iris Murdoch, which was a very fun, philosophical, and oddly difficult to get through novel. Um,
It was a real. At first, I was like, "Oh, this will be fun," and I was like, "Oh, this is still real, somewhat modernist literature." As it went along.
yeah, it was like Murphy except easy. Um,
And maybe, I mean, dare I say, human? I mean, I love
yes,
Beck, but there is
human,
a
human.
human quality to
Um,
him.
I, I mean, there was practically. I mean, there was so many little bits and pieces where it just felt like, reciprocated love is a short circuit, and like here, like yeah, you have the same kind of like involved nests of affections that like occur in that book too.
You have
Uh,
it. You have it from the. Okay, wait. Let's just say what it's about. It's about a guy. A lot of the books we read are about losers, basically. And there's a sort of mid 20th century loser, and he's a very lovable loser. That's kind of what he is. You know.
yeah, as in he's like a sort of a hack writer. He translates shoddy books. He sponges off people around him. He's not like totally awful or something, but
Oh no, he's a really friendly guy. Everyone is. These are all kind of lovely people in a weird way. Like you would not be robbed by them.
yeah.
They're fine. They're not just like criminals. Well,
They might break into
well,
your
they sort of
apartment
are.
for some reason. They might borrow your dog, but
They'll treat him well. They'll treat the dog well. Oh, that was
but
great.
so they're just a little bit shaky on the property right side of things. But
Very much so.
still, no, nobody here is a mean bastard. Um,
No, they're just sort of like, like you actually get a picture as to why he is the way that he is. I think that's one of the brilliant things of the novel is that you don't just like Jake as like a affable loser. You see him spurn opportunities and you kind of understand why he does it. Not like you don't endorse it, but you do like go like, yeah, he's gonna do that.
yeah, and taking opportunities that make no sense in
Yeah.
retrospect. I was like horribly misinformed.
Oh, and then pleasantly paranoid. Like he's like I thought it was actually like a whole lot of this book hinges around the the hauntings of his previous writing, right? Like his early book written with inspired by the philosopher Hugo, who's great. And he has this whole idea of it, and it's just not anything to do with his idea of it, which was
Well, it's okay. One thing about the book is
yeah.
it's a mess of things.
Oh
It's
yeah, it's like the least
it's
focused
a
book
bunch
ever.
of like sort of like half begun conflicts and developments that
Mhm.
putter out anticlimactically, and with no sense of completion whatever.
And
Um,
then random events are sort of aggressive and violent, like this like political riot around this guy. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
total horror show, and it's like
It's
not
like
really that related.
he comes back from Paris and he's like he's going to like the sort of the woman that he was living in the same apartment with, and I guess there's some kind of not quite romantic relation, but something going on there. And then he's getting sort of kicked out. He's trying to find somewhere else to live, and in the process, he gets in. He gets hired as like a bodyguard for like this other woman who's her sister. It's
Cindy.
who ends up locking him into her apartment, and then his friends come by and pick the lock for him, and then
Yeah,
they
I
go
love
over and try to
Sadie.
find his old friend who he stopped seeing because he wrote a book about their conversations that caricatured them in an implicit level. It's a lot of stuff here.
It's all over, and and there were certain points where it's a little exhausting. Weirdly similar to Murphy, where Murphy at times, even though it was 100 pages shorter, felt so dense that I was a little overwhelmed. Murdoch is like Murphy from the outside. Like Murphy's like the parent, the strange being in the inside of subjectivity and how strange and alien it is to be. Whereas Murdoch's comedy, it only can be comedy because you get a little distance. It's from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, the absurdity of the events are things like he's going over to someone's apartment. I forget the exact reason, but he's going over there and he's overhearing a conversation that they're having, and he finally like figures out a way to sort of sit sort of I think on the fire escape below the window so he can overhear them.
Yeah.
And then these old, just seemingly senile women are yelling down there, "Are you okay? Are you all right? You know, have you escaped from a mental asylum?" Oh.
Yeah, it was like it's like meet the a lot of this is like meet the Fockers, right? Like very but more but better, obviously.
Yeah,
It's not.
and he's just in a state of like furious anxiety of just trying to like get them to go away so that, the people he's eavesdropping on don't hear him.
There's
Um,
a great thing where on one hand he's like, my novel doesn't he plays this really funny double thing where he's like, on the one hand, my novel doesn't really matter. In this other way, though, he's like obsessed. Like it does matter. He can't it's like as soon as there's a little distance, he's like, it really matters because of its connection to Hugo. But it
yeah,
is funny how he like claims it doesn't matter.
yeah, and it's weird like that whole like line of the novel of he at one point in his life he was friends with this. I don't even want to call him philosopher, more like a sage.
Like a dude, yeah,
Um,
he's like a guru.
Yeah, like he doesn't have a form of philosophy, but he's just able to ask you questions about like, oh, so you translate, what's that like? And then after a while, it's like, what do you mean that you've found the right translation? Is that just an internal feeling, or is it the meaning? And what do you mean that it means exactly the same thing? In what sense could that be? Like so on and so forth. And it's like, and basically able to make things that seem perfectly straightforward and obvious at first glance entirely inscrutable and unintelligible afterwards by
No,
just
she's
careful.
making fun of her own ilk. She's making fun of her own people.
Well,
Inexpensive, right? I mean, haven't you had that
well,
conversation with philosophy people sometimes?
yeah. As in some of them are okay. Hugo, that character is presented more or less straightforwardly as just like this is good. Like the way he approaches things, it's marvelous the way he does things. Dave, the other philosopher, is somewhat different as a more conventional philosophical mind, a really good one.
Yeah, he's more just like a critical dude.
And like the way he's presented is as like I used to have philosophical discussions with Dave, but he'd keep saying that he didn't understand what I meant, and by that he meant that he thought I was speaking perfect nonsense, which is which is exactly like the way that like when you have a philosophical discussion that you do think this person's saying nonsense, but let him elaborate his meaning, and maybe by doing that we'll move forward. um
And there's a I think there is a sort of this is super active today, but like, you tell someone you read philosophy or you study even in your free time philosophers, and often a layperson, especially like at a bookstore, will be like, "Oh man, like the time quake of the past just evolve." Like they'll just spew nonsense at you, because once you say you're into deep thinking, they go to whatever deep thinking is, and it's just it's just religious Jungian farts, right? It's like just
yeah,
whatever.
well, in
Not
in
that, not
this
that
in this
Jake would.
novel we don't get anybody like
No.
pseudo intellectual like that. Either they're decidedly superficial, or well, actually there's a tiny bit of that when like I think when we meet Anna, it's like she's sort of in her own distorted way repeating what Hugo said, but there's at least some kind of connection to
There's a
like.
connection there because it's related to her desire for him, because she likes him, but he likes Sadie. And by the way, that was like all super confusing.
Yeah,
But
it was wonderful how confusing it
I
was.
was like,
It
because
was.
like I got Sadie as a character. Anna is slightly more mysterious on purpose. Like Sadie, I got like she is this almost type of person, but like Anna, I didn't. I don't know. She was more human, but like she didn't have as much screen time.
Well, we barely really get to see Anna. It's in like we get like really one scene with her, a narrative description of her background a bit, and then like a letter later. we really don't get to know Anna. Like, and Sadie, I mean, there's not a whole lot to know exactly. Like, just the way she's like, you meet her in the hairdresser's lounge, and how she's just so happy to tell all this gossip to Jake in front of all the other girls getting their hair done. And that particular kind of bright, gossipy way of speaking she has.
Yeah.
It's like she's fun, she's great. Just she's that kind of person.
Yeah, well, I mean, I I knew this person who's not going to be named in high school, and I was just reading this character as her. Like this person was the type where she was like pretty wealthy, and when her parents finally cut her off and she had to get a job, her boyfriend took her into a field so she could scream. And it's like, just I don't know, there was a little bit of Sadie in there, like locking someone in. Really,
Yeah.
it is great. Yeah, I think that the philosophy side of this is weirdly not the hard parts to read. Like keeping track of people's wants and goals and what's going on in the plot was much harder than the philosophical descriptions that were beautiful that Murdoch was able to almost conjure up. Like they were like suddenly out of nowhere you'd have a sentence and you were like, whoa, damn, okay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just stuff like that. Just I'm gonna butcher it, but like just describing the character of Finn, who Jake's been living with, and how he's a very simple character apparently,
Yes.
um, and the way he's described as. I'm sorry, I'm just losing track of my thoughts.
I'm
Wait,
sorry, keep going. I'm checking on my cat because sometimes she doesn't do well with my dog.
mhm.
And I heard
the
my
way the way he's described as not exactly having an inner life, but luckily Jake's had so much of an inner life that
yeah.
it makes up for it, or something like that. And it was just funny. Um,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's it's so dense you almost forget all the great little quips, right? It's not like I mean, the novel felt 400 pages to me.
yeah, yeah, and it was a very just very okay, just one just like about Hugo that I just
Yeah.
happened to fall on, just like the sort of questions he's asking. What do you mean when you say you think the meaning in French? How do you know you're thinking it in French? If you see a picture in your mind, how do you know it's a French picture? Or is it that you say the French word to yourself? What do you see when you what do you see when you see that the translation is exactly right? Are you imagining that someone else would think, seeing it for the first time? Or is it a kind of feeling? What kind of feeling? Can you describe it more closely? And so on with a fantastic patience. This sometimes became very exasperating. What seemed to be the simplest utterance soon became, under the repeated pressure of Hugo's "you mean," a dark, confused saying of which I no longer myself knew the meaning. The activity of translating, which had seemed the plainest thing in the world, turned out to be an act so complex and extraordinary that it was puzzling to see how any human being could perform it. Like that, like this is great. This is great.
Right. Yeah, especially the end there, that where and it's it's a sort of basically just Hugo's a Socratic dialectic guy.
Yeah, intensely, intensely, and I like that. And he's the purest in that sense because he doesn't even have his own point of view exactly, or a point of view that. Well,
Well,
okay,
that just sets him up to have a very strong singular. Okay, so like what's great about Hugo, right, is that like he has this emptiness that is sort of the Socrates positioning. And then erupting in the second half is him as like deranged lover, like unrequited lover, which I thought was sort of beautiful in a sense of like what was he holding back early on and how did Anna fall so in love with him and him fall so unrequitedly in love with Sadie, who's kind of shallow. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just funny.
yeah, and the thing is like that was also funny about it is Sadie told all of this to Jake, and then afterwards Jake is like, I don't find this at all plausible. It's probably that maybe Hugo's interested in Anna, like that could be believable. And then
Yeah.
later it's like, no, no, not at all. Um,
He sort of goes kind of fucking crazy in a great way. Like he's like getting rid of all his possessions and he's going off to he's just he's exiting the scene at the end. Um, which I don't know, gives him a very strong character arc, I think. Or at least a character arc. I don't know about strong, but
I mean, it's weird. It's weird to talk about an arc in this book because it is just so fragmentary, all these little bits and pieces. Like, yeah, like the whole bit about like, oh, Hugo, yeah, like Jake and these great conversations. Jake decided to start writing them down and turning them into a book, but realizing that, well, this is a just a caricature of what it really was. Like the way I'm describing it just isn't what it's like at all, which is completely in contrary to a lot of our conversations.
Mhm.
Where it's like the whole issue is like, how do we get underneath the net of language? How do we get past this wall of incommunicability? Um, and that's so he's deeply conflicted about like that, and he stops being friends with Hugo out of sheer guilt for having published the book. And then it's like, well, now I just feel this like overwhelming desire to actually try to reestablish things with him, but it's like, it's like, well, I go to his apartment, and I don't know, he says he left a note saying he's out at the bar, and then we're going to the bar, and oh, Lefty happens to be there, so we end up just drinking with Lefty and going in the lake, and we'll deal with Hugo some other time.
we'll do
Uh,
review guys another time. And also like it's just funny because like Lefty is this sort of we all know a lefty. He's lefty. He's very left wing. He's
yeah,
he's like a caricature of a human because he's so there's a moment where Jake is like, there's got to be something deeper there with Lefty. I don't know. It's
yeah, and
like
one thing that was funny is he's just such the dogmatic thinker in this capacity of like he's talking to him and he has these almost like prearranged questions for Jake of like,
oh
well,
yeah.
why have you stopped being interested in politics? And like why do you and like, well, why do you think it's hopeless? And like, why do you? And like, and then at a certain point, like, when we get to a certain question, he like pulls out of his briefcase or whatever a pamphlet of like,
Yeah.
why you left the left, or something like
It was
that.
something super silly, but
And
also brilliant.
and then it's like he then asks just some question. Well, why are you here tonight? An actual like human individual question about what you're doing today. Like
Yeah.
it was shocking.
Yeah,
Um,
and it took forever, right? Because at first it's like we have to get through his spiel, like a Jehovah's Witness basically, and it was like they all like Lefty, but it's very Jake just kind of tolerates Lefty. He's fine. He's like it's okay. He's fine. But I think that why they like Lefty is just because he parties, and it's like he drinks and
Well, I
they
mean,
go
I
on the
think it's
lake
probably a
or
little, a
whatever.
little I think it's maybe a little bit more to him because he's actually like passionate about this and shows a certain
Sure.
amount of courage to actually like for his cause, and there's more to Lefty.
Yeah, and there's also more structurally to the novel because like Jake doesn't desire in that way. Like he doesn't have that type of proselytizing passion in him.
Yeah, Jake's desires are violent and sporadic. Um, he's sort of just he hasn't really thought about Anna in like months or years, and then he thinks, oh, I have to go see her now. He hasn't actually interacted with Hugo in a long time, but now it's like he's getting back. Like, oh, I have to go see Hugo and see where things stand, even though like even when he's his options, like, well, you could just wait in front of his apartment for a while. Like, that's an option. You could just wait for him to get back home from the studio. This is also an option. You don't have to spend all your money to go down to, the movie plaza or whatever that was, the film set where he happens to be working.
Right. Well,
Um,
he's a really impulsive guy.
Like you don't have, you could actually just wait for him to like the afternoon to be finished, like the speech that you're listening to with Hugo to be finished. You don't have to like literally judo him into through doors in order to like have
I
a.
had so much trouble picturing that scene.
It's fine. I mean,
It was
it goes
fine.
into great detail about like the actual mechanics of like turning somebody over or whatever. I guess I don't know what Iris Murdoch did for this. Like, did she actually study judo at some point, or did she just like ask an expert? Um,
I wonder, I also think that like one thing that's kind of common is that Jake will be he's not very self-reflective. Like he never asks the question. Well, he's self-reflective in certain ways, but he rarely asks the question. Like I thought it was interesting he never asked the question why Hugo found the book and wasn't as obsessed with finding him as he was with finding the other. You know what I'm
um,
saying? Like
I
he doesn't
don't actually. I don't think I'm actually. I think I disagree on this
they
because
and by the way, a lot of these things when I'm wrong in this book, I might be factually wrong because it was actually kind of tricky. Weirdly, it was a tricky read. So,
yeah, it
do you
was.
think there was evidence that he kind of was aware of that?
There were lots of times where he was asking himself questions and like going into analysis of like, well, what do we like? With Hugo specifically, it was like there was a whole internal debate like after like Hugo hung the phone up on him about like, well, wait, I'm thinking about his,
Oh
what
yeah.
does this mean, like what that does, and like then later on, like after he's had this
Mhm.
brief meeting with Hugo at the film set, that gets interrupted. He's on the boat actually like actively thinking about the gestures and
Yes.
intonations and like
Yeah,
of
you're right. Scratch that.
now, one thing I will say is sometimes he is deeply unreflective and impulsive and at the moment of like just deciding like, you know what? Fuck it. I can't find the translation of my work, which probably isn't even worth that much as we later realize. I'm going to steal this dog. I'm going to steal the famous dog Mars that's like a motion picture actor. Um,
Yeah.
basically like I'm going
Well,
to it's like, and like then it's like later on, it's like they're talking with Dave, and Dave is like with with Socratic relentlessness going through like how this, where exactly do you stand here, and what is your relative bargaining power? And like
right. Well, but then it turns out, I feel like with everything that happens in this novel, there's a little bit of a process where it turns out to mean something different. So even with the dog, yeah, he's the star, but he's like past his prime and like not worth much. He's not going to be in any more movies. He's kind of done with that. And so I feel like one of the big messages of this novel that like just happens all the time is like people assume a little bit more than they do. Like, oh, this dog's valuable. I must this dog must be valuable. Okay, it's actually not that valuable.
he's
You can
14 years
have it.
old, he'll never
Or
act again.
yeah,
Um,
like oh, my friend, my former friend must be super mad at me. No, he's just scaling lines. He's doing his own thing, and it's so it's kind of like it's like a cure for that neurotic guessing of the other person. It's like, oh, I don't know, maybe they're not thinking anything that I'm thinking at all.
yeah, it it's something of a farce of reason.
Yeah,
Um, of like, there's a lot of like you think and like it makes sense like the whole idea of like, yeah, Sadie's lying to me about this and that, and
yeah.
it's like, well, no, she's actually not. That was just the truth as it turned out later. Like that was nothing absurd about that with all, or just like, well, you really should have sort of thought through the whole business about stealing the dog, and like this is silly. And there's just like lots of things where it's like reason isn't relevant to how people are doing things, and there are just like actions that just seem utterly inscrutable to the characters at the time while they're doing them because they're so entranced by it, like particularly when he like turns down this job at the film,
That was a
uh,
really important moment. I think
which
that was the
there
moment.
was a reason, like he was reflecting on it, he was thinking it through, like, why didn't I take this fabulous step forward for me in my career, and as a in film, and it's like he's just sort of baffled why he rejected it at the time. He sort of comes up with the reason afterwards, but like that's a little different. Um,
There is sort of an aspect of Jake living a bare life, like he kind of wanders. He's kind of a hobo almost, but like there's also a sense that like, yeah, but if I get a job and I'm tied down, like I can't steal that dog anymore. Like he has a certain amount of freedom at the station he's at. And he just seems really conflicted at points of if he actually is willing to make a change to live differently. Like I don't feel like we're ever supposed to read this and be like, "Oh, Jake, I feel so bad for you." Like, no, he's occasionally pretty happy. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know how to read
like
him.
one thing that's interesting. I mean, okay, one thing about it is like this is not a mournful book.
No,
There's,
no.
you could say there's some sad things, sort of like, like it's sad, like the fact that like, his friend wasn't around, like, like he and him like broke off, or, but it's like it's very much just like, we're down and out and having a good time. And
It
like,
was sad when Finn
maybe like
left.
the description of like Paris, of just like, just like how it's like, it took me many years to realize the particular sadness I would feel in Paris was actually happiness.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think that's great. That's great.
There is also a general theme in here of it's not thematized as freedom, you know, but there is like, okay, so you make more money, then you have more responsibilities. Oh, you get entrenched. Oh, you can't. Like, and I think that Jake is concerned with his freedom as it pertains to his ability to be impulsive.
Um,
I don't know. Say it better. There's something in there. Freedom.
I'm not quite. I'm not sure about that. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just not exactly sure of. Let me just like read aloud sort of the section I highlighted of his introspection
Yeah.
on the rejecting of like the stable job. It wasn't just that I didn't want to enter Madge's world and play Madge's game, the woman who offered him the position. I had so littered my life already with compromises and half truths, I could have picked my way through a few more. The twisting hills of falsehood never cease to appall me, but I constantly enter them, possibly because I see them as short corridors which lead out again into the sun. Though perhaps this is the only fatal lie. I didn't care for the role of valet de sentiment which Madge had prepared for me, but I could perhaps have supported it because I really liked Madge because of the cash prizes if there had been nothing else at stake. I had said to Madge that it wasn't Anna, and I think that was true. What my relations with Anna might or mightn't compel me to do in the future remained to be seen. I felt indeed almost fatalistic about it. If Anna was strong enough to draw me to her, over every obstacle she was strong enough to draw me, and the obstacles would overcome at the proper time. Meanwhile, Madge was in no position to make complaints. It wasn't that. Um, I mean, well, okay, I didn't get to actually the proper line that actually I think. When I asked myself what it was, there rose authoritative before me the shop window which I had seen earlier that morning, surmounted by the pre-go car, and like that, okay, maybe I'm messing this up. Maybe there's some other thing that it goes into, but like the fact that it's like what actually presented him was just sort of this kind of like almost envy of like this other author who. Oh, no, I don't even think it was that. I do think there was actually no. Now thinking about it, there were other lines earlier. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody, for being so contradictory and self-involved over here. To
Contradictory and self-involved. I mean, it's sort of the novel.
Yeah. No, I do
we're
think
we're
he
mirroring the
does
novel here.
mention that it's something like he wants to live his way.
He wants to live his life.
Yeah, and like sort of getting involved with Madge with this sinecure she's offering him, as he puts it. That is problematic. I don't really see him like acting towards that end in the rest of the book of like securing his freedom.
Yeah.
Um, but like that is the thing that like motivates him in that moment.
I mean, would freedom for okay, there is the envy for the other writer. First of all, just like I have had this experience of like composers I knew in undergrad who are just fucking horrible, and like then you visit them 10 years later, and you're like, no way, they can write? What? Where did this come about? It happens. They go to grad school, they get more serious. And so I loved that theme in this book with the other writer of like behind my back, this writer got to be a real writer. Um, I also think there's a tinge. I think envy was the right word. I forget his name. Remember his name? He's not important in the novel. I just
John Pierre.
Jean Pierre. Yeah, there is a tinge of envy of like. I think that was where Jake had his like not like sense of mortality, but something of like, oh, I haven't been doing that.
Yeah.
Basically, I haven't been. It's like that would be his sense of responsibility, right? Is to write like great books or whatever, like to be good at that. And I think that's one where maybe he does feel guilty. I don't know though. I don't know if I have any evidence for that.
No,
The
no.
end,
I,
the
th-
quote.
I think that is relevant. Of like, yeah,
Mhm.
like this other writer who he's been copying, and now it's like this writer has suppressed me. Like I used to look down on him in contempt, and now
Mhm.
the roles are reversed. Um,
And that's yeah. I mean, I've been in points of my life like that. Now I'm actually in the opposite, where it's like absolutely very little matters except for the art. Whereas like when I was in the grad school, it's like, oh, there's all these things that matter. What am I going to do in this class? How am I going to go over here? And then when you get out of school, it's a little more extreme. It's a little more like, well, I have Anna, I have some friends, and I have books. And so there are periods, even in the last year, where I'm like, this month I'm not doing anything. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But then you feel actually irresponsible, right? You're like, wait a minute, now it is just my own desire. There's no big other, there's no symbolic. It's just me sitting here not writing a book. And so yeah, I related to Jake. I
yeah,
also relate to Jake's sense of freedom. And I might be overreading it, putting my own spin on it, but I mean, I'm not at the academy and I'm working at a bookstore, and I feel more free. I don't know if I am, but I feel freer to do what I want. And that's a value I have. Um, I don't know. It's interesting. Do you know if Iris Murdoch was like a faculty or was she freelance her whole life? I don't.
like she was like a philosophy professor, I think.
I forgot she's a philosophy, not even in the lit department.
Yeah, she was just like flat out just doing like academic philosophy and teaching courses, from what I understand.
I feel
Um,
like talk about jealousy. What if you were in the English department of where she was at, and
yeah,
like,
and and it's like you're fucking like she's doing everything I'm doing, and I have to teach her now. Um,
yeah, it's like you would just feel like a weenie, Be like, oh yeah, I published my books. Which press? Really small presses? Oh, isn't Iris Murdoch in your department? No, she's in the other department.
yeah, she's one thing that this book does remind me of, by the way, is it does remind me of nausea. In being like just that same kind of like not coming of age. That's the wrong word because the character are of age, but just like something along the lines of like just this sort of very loose series of like developments that are heavily philosophical and fragmentary that sort of culminate in like, okay, I have some kind of artistic vision now. I have something I want to say about things.
And I
Um,
haven't, I haven't, you're gonna kill me, but we should probably do it soon. I haven't actually. I've read a lot of Sartre's philosophy and a lot of his plays, but I haven't actually done his novels at
yeah,
all.
not just fun. Not just a good book.
I love to read that one.
Like there was like I think when I read it, there was a particular stream of consciousness sequence that was um, extremely evocative of not a breakdown I had, but certainly a moment of intense emotional tumult.
Is it the phenomenology of the tree part where he's looking
No,
at
no, this is
the
a
tree is
different one.
really
This was
macabre?
no, no, not that. Like I mean, although I
That's a
do
great. That's a great
regularly
part.
feel like a overwhelming disgust at life.
Oh yeah.
in all of its surging corpulence. But um, no, like it was actually just a different scene where he was just so repelled by a certain incident that had happened that he had this sort of, well, to put it in your terms, like a he was interacting with the real.
Mm,
Um, we'll read it one day. We'll read it one day, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I will. But so this so here's my question for you about the Murdoch as a whole, because it's kind of these people drifting around, and there's some things that definitely change. Jake gets a dog. He trades. He actually trades Jake. He trades Finn for the dog in a weird structural sense.
Yeah.
If you notice that because at the
The only
beginning,
question is who has the richer emotional life, richer intellectual life.
right? Because Finn's fine. He's kind of a dog. I don't know. Like
No,
he's like a
he
companion.
is very much of just like, yeah, you ask him to do things and he does them and he has his own little opinions about them, but you kind of can set them aside.
He's also an animal and goes and gets wasted for a couple days of the week.
Yeah,
Like,
when he gets
okay.
money, he decides he'll finally go back to Ireland as he always said he would. Um,
Well, yeah, like traded. Yeah, it's a weird thing that he. I know I want to reread it and see if he's actually that's more like literal. Like there's a couple scenes where they're together, but it's like first half Finn, Finn and Jake. Jesus Christ! Hello, Adventure Time. Finn and Jake are the main characters. Well, Finn's never a main character. Just he's actually like. Did you get the sense that Finn was introduced wrong? Like he was portrayed as like I thought he was like mentally handicapped.
no, no,
No,
I didn't have that. I mean, it was made very clear his intellectual limitations. Um,
but
but
he has more than I thought he had at the beginning. Like the way he was described was like not exactly the way he became. I don't know. Maybe I'm just
Well, I
wrong.
mean, he is a bit stupid. As in, they go through this whole bit. As in, he's spending the whole evening with Finn. They're looking for Hugo. Then they're messing around with Lefty, and they go run in a lake. And then it's like, oh, I have a letter from Anna. And then
Oh,
you open up the letter from Anna, and it says like, come here immediately.
yeah.
And it's like, great, like 16 hours too late, buddy. Um,
Actually, Finn really fucked that up because
he did.
he missed the window. He
Yeah.
was out getting drunk. I mean, what? Okay, so here's the overall question: is like, other than these small structural moments, um, do you think this has a very tight structure that's just kind of more hidden, or do you think its virtue is its looseness?
I think it does have a very definite structure. I think this sort of very fragmentary, picking up different threads that resolve in a odd sort of way. Each one of them, I think that's very. It's all very selective on Murdoch's part. I get a very clear image of a particular way of viewing human action.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of it's like you set out with a certain goal that's kind of spastic but very violently desired.
Yes.
You do things that are frankly absurd and reasonable, and embarrassing afterwards, during. You reflect on what you did and you see it didn't really do anything good for you. Like you kind of just fucked up, maybe, or it works out halfway. Um, it's these kinds of almost tempest in a teapots kind of conflicts that happen, that are in part the result of like overthinking issues too. Um,
Yeah.
like that's all of the little strings in the novel add up to that picture, and I think given what
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know what her other novels are like. I don't like whether she has like more complicated view of human nature, but like just the fact of like you the whole episode of I we have to steal the dog, and they're spending
Yeah.
all of this and just one little bit of it, which is like a great like microcosm of it, is they're like picking. They're trying to like, okay, well, how are we going to get the cage through because we can't open up the cage. And they're trying to pick it up, but the dog is like, his legs are sort of dangling through, and you can't do that. You might hurt the dog. And they're trying to like get like uh, like these curtains through it, in order so he can stand up through it. But the dog still like it stands on the curtains in such a way that it goes down. They're like trying to think, well, we could do string, but no, that wouldn't have hurt for this other reason. And then at a certain point, they just realize, well, no. While considering the dog's welfare, we had not considered its intelligence. If you just raise the cage on its side, it will just realize that it needs to stand on the bars.
Yeah.
All of that furious cogitation you had done earlier was utterly impotent. And, um,
It kind of, in a sense, that is exactly the microcosm you're talking about. It's also a sort of like a balm for obsessiveness. Like because sometimes obsessiveness isn't intelligence, right? It's not like I they obsess over the cage, but I don't necessarily think that they always think very reasonable. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say the Shakespearean phrase, the best laid plans go to waste. It seems more like it's not so apocryphal. Oh, you froze.
oh no, I'm
There.
here. Um, yeah, no, it's yeah, as in there's the author this reminds me of most directly in terms of this view of human action is actually Faulkner. Um, because like the beginning of Light in August is like this woman who's looking for her the her baby daddy, um, who who made love to her while she was unmarried. Said, "Oh, I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll send my word of mouth to you eventually." And then like while she's 8 months pregnant, she finally decides like, okay, I'm going to go like search for him. She has no idea where he is. She's just walking down the road asking, "Have you seen Joseph? Have you seen Joseph?" And like they're just like, "Well, I know
So,
a Joseph over there." Like, as only by like sheer dumb luck she ends up finding him. And
wow.
it's such a great vision of like, well, you're pursuing an object that will not stay with you. Like, so it's absurd even trying to look for him. Like, this is fucking dumb. And you're doing it in a way that should not by any reason work.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like it's a Faulkner. I would say at least like Murdoch's characters, their actions are somewhat more connected to reality. There's somewhat more of a sense of it
Well,
being reasonable what they're doing.
and the stupid thing I went to is these are happy people. I mean, they're not always happy people, but I mean, you don't have the weight of generational trauma in this book
Yeah,
at all. That's just not a
yeah,
fact.
like
You
yeah,
know?
as in it's not nearly as everybody's more or less having a good time. Like
So
everybody.
even if they killed themselves, it'd be less sad than Faulkner. Like there's something in Faulkner which is like life is pretty terrible, and we're gonna make it through, but this is gonna suck. And like Iris Murdoch is kind of the inverse of like life's pretty fun. I mean, you might have a bad time, but you'll probably still have fun.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
very cheerful, at least as far as this novel is concerned. I don't know what her other works like the Sea, or The Black Prince are like. Which I have the sense that's a little bit more grim, but I'm not sure.
or any of her other 30 novels.
Yeah. Which it's amazing how many this lady did, guys. I mean, look at them all. Look
Look
at
at
them
them
all.
all. And
Jesus.
the Sea is like 500 pages. These are not like novellas. These are novels. These are big boy eat your Wheaties novels, and they're also dense. They're not like Simonon and whatever, like whoever pulp or fun stuff. Even Somerset Maugham. Somerset Maugham is a lot of works. Everything we read was slightly breezier. Um, I'm still amazed at Somerset Maugham and Iris Murdoch because he might actually have her beat, but at least it
This
was
was also a first novel, so just give her that a little bit.
yeah.
And like, okay, I've read like 13 of his novels and a shit ton of the stories.
Yeah.
So I would say they're not as philosophical as Murdoch. They don't have as many like little gems, but in terms of like raw literary merit, like
These are both massively impressive
these are
people.
these are certainly comparable. These are
Yeah.
certainly comparable. I mean, the only actually one thing I'll say about Mom, like one thing that's a little bit um not disappointing, but I feel is lacking in a certain way with Murdoch, which you don't have to, is there wasn't enough of like a heart or seriousness to the novel.
Mm.
Because like that is like an important part of like of a novelist at some point letting the cards down and making you feel here's something really really important. This is something I care about with my whole soul. That doesn't
And
mean
who
it has
else?
to be like tragic or sad, but like that has to come up on some level. And I don't feel that with Murdoch. It's like, oh, this is fun, this is nice, and it's a little bit there. It is a little bit there.
Do you think there was a missed? So like I was thinking that to the closest we got was the scene of Jake and Hugo saying goodbye.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
a little
That was the closest, and I do think,
I think there could have been much more of that though, because I mean it's not going to change the tide. It's a hilarious novel. That's not the problem. Yeah, I would agree completely. I felt so we've heaped praise on Iris Murdoch. And I think this is where we can shift a little bit to some criticisms because I think she's great, but I think what makes her slightly I don't know why I found her a little tiring. Like I loved it, but I
yeah,
found it
yeah, I did
exhausting.
too. Like there was just something of, it's like this is all very well and good. Stop. Um, like
Yeah,
I don't know exactly because like I would not cut out anything in this book, because it's all just that little detail about like the dog. Actually,
mm-hmm.
no, actually that's a good example on some level of like when I think about that detail, it's great, it's fun, but I also was a little bit tired of it at the same time.
Well,
Um,
I had a coworker who said everyone I know has only read one Iris Murdoch novel, and I was like, oh, why is that? And then she was like, because they're so great, but you don't need any more. It's kind of what she said, and I was like, yeah, there's a certain and we talked more about it and we kind of hit on the similar thing of tiredness, but why is it tiring? Every when I started getting into it, I actually didn't find it tiring. It's only afterwards the prospect of having to read it. Those things made me tired. When I was actually in the flow, I was fine, but
I
I was
think
really ready
it
for it to be
is. I mean, it's like I kind of want to say it's a little bit because of just the lack of heart.
lack of heart.
Of like there's you never quite get the sense of these characters are really striving after something that like matters. Like okay, like to take Murphy as a contrast, which is also a very tiring book.
But for different
Um,
reasons.
yeah, but it's tiring because like that fucking style is like just attacking you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no other reason for it to be tiring, but it doesn't need more than of a reason.
Yeah,
That
but
reason
the,
is
but the
very
thing is,
strong.
like, there's something about just like Murphy not wanting to get a job, of like withdrawing into his like three planes of consciousness, and like that makes him remarkable and interesting in a very deep way. That and like then like other characters like sort of then pursuing him like makes it feel like, oh, that's natural, that's yeah, Murphy, it's Murphy, like this is a guy worth pursuing, while Jake doing this other just very, I mean, to say farcical is almost too light of a word, or it's too perfect of a word. um
Mm.
for it, of like just yeah, it's like kidnapping the dog and like just like the going into the during the protest, and then there's a bit like while the police are raiding it, there's like they the whole of the Rome set is falling over their heads. um
That was a great part. That was
yeah, that
maybe
was that
the
was
best
great,
writing.
that was
I was
that
just
was
having fun.
genuinely great, yeah.
I wasn't tired during that chapter.
Yeah, but I'm just saying like these sorts of
Yeah.
things, it's like, and there wasn't, and maybe another part of it I'll say is there wasn't a lot of there was momentum in some sense, but there was also just like too. I like what she's doing with these dropped threads that she has.
Hmm.
That's but it was also kind of too much of like it's
Yes.
I sort of just forgot about other characters for a while. Like when Faulkner does his stuff and it's like, okay, yeah, this is an absurd action. This is an absurd goal done with absurd means.
Yeah.
But I'm behind it. Like I'm stuck with it. I'm stuck here and like I mean and like Faulkner is like it's like fucking horrifying. Like you're really getting like some real like human suffering out of like this. Like Joe Christmas in Late August is like is just a horrifying monster ultimately. But there's something still very like engaging about that. Um
Do you think this is sort of like, I mean, I hate putting things in number terms, but like is this sort of the final gap between 9 out of 10 and 10 out of 10? Like the sort of like, well, there's something. And I for me, I don't need heart. I'm fine with sociopathy to a certain degree, but I can't have no heart and a problem with momentum. I have to have one or the other. For example, there's certain Balzac novels where I'm like, everyone is fucking crazy and I'm just here for it. 10 out of 10. It's amazing. But it's because his momentum is so gargantuan. He drives to
one
the end
thing,
like
but like one thing about a Balzac novel though is like there is heart in that these characters. Holy fuck, they care.
yeah,
This is life or death what they're pursuing. And I want to say about her about Iris
yeah,
is that she no Jake does care about things.
yeah.
Like they do actually like cut him, and like that's why he does them. Like there are very strong emotions. It just doesn't gel together, and it's just too farcical. And it's I
Mm,
mean one thing that is interesting about is it's she doesn't write like Proust, but it almost has this like Proustian self reflection so much of the time. Like it's just you're just sort of involved in like his own introspection and recollections and speculations for so long that it's like it feels a little antiseptic. Now, Proust, by the way, has kind of more heart. Like there is like a certain deep tragedy in how he writes, which makes him appealing in that way. Um,
right. Well, I also think that like you know, there is a British and also Irish sense of the exhaustive description. And I think to contrast that would be with authors like Ali Smith, Simonon, who you just sort of fall down the page. Krasznahorkai, these are two living writers where it's like you don't get gummed up in the internal workings of the mind. You just fall through each page really quickly. And that was something I thought in the Somerset Mom that he was really good at was it was a quicker read. Um, and I like wish my way to like make this 10 out of 10 is not feasible because it was already a great novel. But like I do wish that as the novel got going, there was less of the memory discussion, less of the modernist internalization, and more of the flowing forward into the momentum. Um, the last 100 pages, I did lose some of the momentum, um, and I wonder if it's because there wasn't like a singular event.
yeah,
I
because
don't
it's
know if I need like I don't
just
need like a
emotionally
traditional arc.
speaking, the climax is with Sadie offering him the job. That's just emotionally like we're at our peak, and like also like simultaneously you're having like like they're just reflecting on like Christ, what are we doing with this dog? Um, so so it's like there's like those two things going on, and it's
Yeah,
like but it's like the Sadie thing comes literally out of nowhere. It's like
Yeah,
there was nothing. It's like okay, it is connected very vaguely, broadly, and it's like, but the thing is, I mean, and like it works. It works like the fact that it's out of nowhere. Like that's a good thing because it's like you just get this sense of yeah, there's this whole other tangle of reality and intriguing and whatever that you're just not even going to touch. Like it's almost Kafkaesque in that sense, in a
yeah.
more polite way, which is how life is a lot of the time, where it's like yeah, there's some other weird working ons going on in the background that I don't have a clue about. Um, so
Well,
like
I think that the exact moment. So if you're right, and I think you are, that the heart of it is when he turns down the job. Then there's sort of a weird third act lull where he suddenly is working at a job as the orderly. There's those were for me even though they were brilliant. Every page is brilliantly written, so I feel terrible. That those were the hardest for me to read because it felt like we were starting a new novel. Almost, it was like, oh, now we got to deal with Hugo, and I was like, oh, and we're gonna do a whole chapter just of what it's like to work at the hospital. And I
Hugo is
I don't
his own
I don't
ish.
know if I need
Oh,
that.
are we talking about like? Oh, okay. I thought. Wait, you're talking about Victor Hugo for a second, or just Hugo in the hospital?
Hugo in the hospital. There's a whole
Okay,
chapter before you get there of just like what it's like to work there, and I was like, well, now I'm really in Murphy. I don't know. It was weird. It was like a weird.
yeah, that that
It
is
was
a
brilliant to
surprising Murphy
describe.
connection. I mean, she had to have read Murphy. Well,
Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
there's a reference to Murphy in the first
Oh
chapter.
yeah, fuck! I forgot. Holy shit! I can't believe I forgot that. I mean, it was weeks ago that we
Yeah,
started this book.
there's
But
like the whole thing is to Raymond Queneau. Queneau? I don't know. Super famous French author, turn of the 20th century. I don't remember. I don't know. We haven't read any of him, but he
yeah,
wrote like
he's
kind of
yeah he's an
dream.
odd one. I don't yeah, but yeah, go on.
Raymond Queneau. Yeah, he wrote it. She wrote it to her friend, who seems a lot stranger of a writer than she is in a certain sense. He's more of an experimentalist, right? Like she's perfectly experimental, but a
Well, yeah,
strange.
he like wrote like something like 50 different descriptions of a man walking onto a bus in different styles.
Oh yeah, and he was like part of Aleppo, right?
I don't
I
know.
think. Okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Um, yeah, so that was where I lost the momentum, and I also think that, but it was still great. Like if you started in reading at that chapter, a person would say you're crazy. It's good, and I'd be like, I know, it's fine. It's just it's a lot. I I think I switched between the pop mindset and the literary mindset a little bit. Where in the pop one everything's moving really fast. I almost consider Balzac a pop writer a lot of the time. Um, and then this sort of literary descriptive thing where like sometimes the district descriptions you get the feeling of like, yeah, she's so great at describing things that we could just do this forever. And then you kind of have that horrified thought of like, oh God, I hope we don't do this forever. So that's probably a little too much for her because she's still comic and interrupts a lot. But I like it. Weirdly, I don't know if I have a lot to debate or talk about on this one. I just like, I don't know, like what else, what are
Yeah, it's
interesting
weird that
conversations?
like this is I think like this is we I think for words that we read, this is the most,
Yeah.
but it also feels like we have the least to say about it. Like I think this might be the shortest episode we'll do. Um,
And I
because
almost feel bad, but I realized I'm going to the well and it was
yeah,
good. I don't know.
yeah,
I liked it.
it's like yeah, like
Sufficiently
it
deep.
was fun. It was very fun. It was very clever, but I don't. I mean, there's sort of philosophical issues she brings up that are interesting, but I guess this is the big thing is like it wasn't a serious enough novel. Like when I think about like a serious novel or a serious work, it's like A Simple Heart, by Flaubert. It's like that's something that we can just talk about and like all of the details just like glow in our memory, and it's so heartbreaking and sad, and it's just wonderful. It's wonderful. This is a book that's like yeah, I mean, sure, we can recount more stuff about like how he was locked into Sadie's apartment, no, Anna's yeah, Sadie's apartment. Yeah, we can recount more about like just the whole episode of gambling on the horse races and the anxiety that surrounded that.
That was funny.
You can talk more about like just I don't know the conversation of like why is he rejecting this really good offer.
But also,
I don't know. It's like
they all have the same structure though. You know, event A is perceived to be happening this way. Retroactively, it was something else. Like there's sort of it's a constant theme throughout the whole book. And so any one event is fine because that's the model. And and I think that the best part of it, like the comedy stuff is very fun and I found it entertaining, but the stuff that was more real literary for me was her philosophical descriptions. Like she's just as very and but even then I felt like one of the writing's virtues was also what made it also tiring was that like occasionally it'd be very slapstick and then we'd vector in to serious writing. And for the first half of this novel, I was texting you all sorts. Oh, I love this. Oh, I want to write this. And then for the second half, I was like, no. And I think it tells too much almost. Like it doesn't let the reader, like a simple heart is very simple of a story. So it's so evocative because we have to talk about it. I don't know anything else to say about this book that she herself didn't comment on in the book.
I mean it's I don't want to I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with writers being very blatant. I mean, Nausea is a very blatant book.
Okay.
Um, or, I don't know, Somerset Mom, in a sense, is very accessible. Like, it's not like there's a whole big question about what's going on. Um, but it's just something about like this isn't as these happenings aren't as profound. Um, the stakes just aren't very high, which you don't like. They're almost getting there at moments, but it's sort of like no, not quite. It's a lot of the book just sort of feels like the first three quarters of the first act.
Well,
Um,
it feels very British, right? So like what would so like the Coen brothers, right, with their comedy, Burn After Reading. Have you ever seen it?
yeah, I've seen Burn After Reading.
Okay, so you know, spoiler alert, there's a really shocking event in the middle that's just one of the greatest moments ever. And I missed that sort of jolt. Like I think the dogs being stolen was supposed to be the jolt, but I was like, I'm an American. It can't be topical. I need a jolt. Like I wish she had done a jolt where like she had to deal with a tone shift because the tone never really shifted in the novel, and that would have been something kind of nice. I don't
Yeah,
know, someone dies or something.
I
You
do
know,
like that.
something.
Yeah, that would be something. That would be something that would like just to give it a bit more teeth, just to give it like a bit more like we're going somewhere.
That's sort of a
Um,
comment we have a lot for the stuff that we really like but don't love, or love but don't think is the greatest. Is you say the phrase a lot, more teeth, and yeah, I think you said it for the Honest Cigars, not the first, not the one of the stoning, but the you know the Mexican children one, or
yeah,
not
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
Mexican children, they're
yeah.
German children.
The memories, the memories.
Yeah, like you kind of said it for that one, and I think you said it for something else. But it's come up a couple times in our podcasts of like this needs more teeth, and I think there is something about great writing that has a really it cues you out into the profound events that happen more. Um, Whereas when reading this in the comedy moments, I felt like it was a fish called Wanda, which
Yeah,
is
no,
very
I
funny.
actually, no, actually, I do feel Fish Called Wanda is like, yeah, just this very fun, enjoyable, very British comedy.
Yeah,
Like that actually is a very precise description of the state of affairs here. Except that, I mean, the one thing is like a Fish Called Wanda develops. And the problem with this is like you don't have development. You have
mhm.
setup and pay out, like not pay off, just yeah, I paid out. I'm done here. Um,
Yeah,
it,
like if it's true that he traded one friend for the dog, that was a problem because he kind of wound up
well,
at the same place.
he did. But like the idea of like, okay, like he meets Anna, they're sort of back in love, and but there's something going on with Hugo and her career, and like we don't actually get to see them then talking about it and confronting it and him reacting in some way to that. It's a sort of like, yeah, we had the setup for a conflict, but no actual proper conflict. Like there's nothing, which is fine. It works, but it's not hurting me. Oh, and actually, that's one thing about the book is like
Yeah.
I want a book to hurt me. I want it to make me squirm. Like that's the ideal for a novel. And like this is not a novel that makes you squirm. I mean, a little bit anxious, like get the fuck out of that apartment, guys. Um
No, I would say that the only part that made me think about myself in that way, in a slightly more deep way, was when it dawns on him that everything he was worried Hugo was thinking was not related to what Hugo was thinking. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was good. I mean, that's great. That was a great moment. But there's also this sense, yeah, that like, a comedy can be a great ploy to really hurt you. There's moments like the ending of the Purple Rose of Cairo by Woody Allen is one of the most heartbreaking ends to a lighthearted comedy I've ever seen in my life. And but it followed deeply imminently from the actions. And I was missing that turn
I mean, to
something.
me, like the best example of a comedy that's meant to hurt you is like Chekhov plays. Like in
Mm.
one in particular, I won't exactly spoil it. I'll just say a character does something that's deeply embarrassing and shameful, we might say,
Yeah.
and he's saying to another character, like, "Oh Christ, it just the shame it burns. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?"
Yeah.
And then another character says, "You're going to do nothing."
Yeah.
Which would I'm sure be the funniest goddamn line in the context. Like I'm making it kind of too, I don't know, melodramatic the way I'm like conveying the first character and a little too dry the other one. But like it would be amazing that comedy, but it hurts because that's right. There's nothing you can do except take it.
Yeah. I think I think that so this is way more Jungian than I usually go, but like there's a sense of like in a lot of comedies, the metaphor is of dancing. People dancing around,
Yeah.
fumbling, and the most sometimes you can end that in the most bittersweet way of just showing the set pieces stop moving. There's any number of ways to break your heart, and I like them all. I just didn't get any of them. So I think we've diagnosed this issue, and it's funny how we've done this a couple times where we start off and we're like, yeah, this is great, and then we talk about the issues, and then we can let down our guard a little and go, okay, yeah, but also like I didn't like reading the last 100 pages, and now we can look back and be more holistic about the novel, about like, well, this is an unquestionably really really good writer, and people should read it. It's great, but I don't think you can fake that what we're talking about. I think just some writing has it. I don't. What do you teach?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
that's either you have it or you don't.
even like Aldous Huxley's first novel, Chrome Yellow. It's like
Yeah,
that's a book that it's very goofy. It's very funny. It's going all over the place. But it does end in like a part that like, oh that hurts. That hurts, Aldous. But
yeah.
anyway, okay, I think we're good.
Okay,
So our problem here is that it didn't really traumatize us like we wanted.
that's
Um,
our main problem. That's one of our goals, and it's not saying that all writing needs to traumatize us. It's just our goal here.
like,
Like that's what I
like,
want,
I
man.
just want to say, like, just in terms of what I hoped for is just like
Yeah,
the name of the novel is Under the Net, and it refers to like language is fundamentally like distortive and from a
Yeah.
distance. Like that would have been beautiful to have written a novel that like conveys that sense of mutual incommunication. And it's really funny, but it's also horrifyingly sad to never actually communicate yourself to another human being. Like that would have been great.
Yeah,
Uh,
like what if Jake, a way to fix it without having to rewrite too much is Jake realizes the guy's left Finn, and there's a lightning bolt of loneliness that Iris Murdoch talks about.
yeah,
He doesn't, but that would have been good
yeah, that would
because
have been good.
he never had a
But it
moment
doesn't
of.
fit the novel. You think you have to change everything else because of the whole tonal capacity. But anyway, I'm curious
Yeah,
to read like the sea, and other things by her because
I
like
gotta take a break. I can't do
yeah,
anymore.
no, I have to too. But like I
Same thing
am
with, it's like when Beckett, we read a Beckett novel. I'm like, I'm good. I'll come back. I will read these people throughout my whole life.
okay.
They are
Other Beckett novels are more fun. But anyway.
okay.
All
Well,
right.
then we should
So
do
so
that
okay.
too.
So anyway, I had fun. Chris. This was great. We'll do the Mishima next week, where thereabouts, before
Yep,
I go off to Norway.
is
Um,
a fantastic story about grief and getting over loss.
mhm.
So the opposite of this.
All right, great, great. All right, so see you later, Chris. Bye,
All
everybody.
right. See ya.